We need to be very clear that you're not going to get gun deaths to zero. It will not happen. Right. You can significantly reduce them through having more fathers in the home, yes, by having more armed guards in front of schools. Yes. Yes. We should have an honest and clear reductionist view of gun violence, but we should not have a utopian one. You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's drivel. Wow. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights.
That voice you just heard was the founder of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk, host of the Charlie Kirk Show. He was 31 years old. And I'm using the word was because Charlie yesterday was killed at Utah Valley University out in Utah at an event that his foundation was doing. For those of you that are tuning in from Alyse Adamson's channel, don't worry, Alyse is here. I'm Mike Leon, host of the Can We Please Talk podcast. This is the Can We Please Talk podcast, and at least you heard it here, podcast collaboration, where we're going to talk about the death of Charlie Kirk, the juxtaposition that people are living with right now in this moment, which is, how do you justify rhetoric like that with somebody being killed by exactly what he just said, the right to own that weapon, and other things that he has said that is controversial, but also at the same time, a father of two little girls who is no longer with us. So with that, I want to open it up here to my panel, which is, as always, Nick Zaveri, my co-host here on the Can We Please Talk podcast, and former federal prosecutor, host of At Least You Heard It Here, Alyse Adamson. So here's how we're going to do this, boys and girls, because we've all been texting each other separately. I've been getting messages, and we posted a short across our socials that has been getting a lot of comments and traction and negativity, and people asking me, why wasn't I talking about the knife attack that happened out in Charlotte? This is not the time for equivalencies right now. This is somebody who lost their life, and we're covering this because of the position he had, let's be honest, to help get the president of the United States currently elected, but also how he was gunned down in cold blood, doing something, free speech, that we would all advocate for, even though we think it's hateful. So I want to turn to you first, Alyse, because you're the former federal prosecutor here. You were telling us this off air, and I'll bring it over here, about seeing dead bodies, right? And you saw the video. We now know that he is deceased, but we also know that he has said certain things like the video that played at the top of the show in the past. Just give me broad range thoughts, emotions about not only what happened with Charlie Kirk, but now what happens in the subsequent days, weeks, months about the Charlie Kirk shooting.
Well, Mike, I just want to start off by saying that this is a national tragedy. Charlie Kirk was obviously a very influential right-wing activist, but whenever we're talking about political violence, we're talking about violence not just toward that individual, but toward our democracy itself. And my thoughts and prayers are with Charlie Kirk's family right now. I have disagreed with everything that man ever said, but nobody deserves this. I was shocked and horrified when I saw that video. I immediately began praying for Mr. Kirk. Nobody deserves death. He was exercising his First Amendment rights. He was doing nothing wrong, and he was actually inviting open discourse. Now, you mentioned the video. I saw it on X pretty soon after the shooting occurred, and my first thought was, this looks like a non-survivable injury. Now, obviously I'm not a medical professional, but I spent a long time as a prosecutor prosecuting violent offenses, and I've seen a lot of gunshot wounds. And watching that video, just the severity of the instantaneous bleeding, how he slumped down, it is an extremely graphic video. Another conversation for another time, Mike, is for why we were even allowed to see that video on social media. It's the video of somebody's murder. It's just re-traumatizing the family and an incredible invasion of privacy, quite frankly. I know there's a public interest element there, but it is truly horrific. And I knew pretty soon after I saw it that Charlie Kirk was probably not going to survive this assassination. with respect to what's going to happen in the coming weeks, first, they have to find the shooter. I think it's important. We are calling this a political assassination because that's what it appears. It has all the features of an assassination. But at the time of this recording, they have not found the suspect. We don't know who did this. We don't know anything about their motivations. But what we do know is that they're going to hunt this individual down and they are going to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. This happened in Utah. It's a state offense, but it could also have a federal hook. I bet you that the Department of Justice is working on how they can charge this federally and how they can bring him into federal court. It looks like an act of domestic terrorism to me. There's lots of statutes that they could charge the shooter under. I mean, I'm thinking of Luigi Mangione, who murdered the healthcare CEO in New York and is facing both state and federal charges. I think you're going to see that here. And we heard the governor of Utah remind everybody that the death penalty is still on the table in Utah. So this person is going to be facing severe consequences and be held accountable as soon as they're caught, but they need to be caught. And again, as the time of this recording, they have no suspects, which is also frightening.
Nick, I want to turn to you because, when I heard that he died through Trump tweeting on Truth Social, and for people that watch our show, they may know where you lean politically. Maybe they can't glean it too much off of me. But here's the one thing that they can easily glean is that we're commentators. We commentate on politics. We push out content that thousands of people have seen, as I've mentioned before about the clip that I posted on our Can We Please Talk socials that's getting a lot of traction about my thoughts on it. I want to get your thoughts on it, but also knowing that kind of what Alyse said, you're diametrically opposed to every single thing this human being has ever stood for, and you watch him get assassinated in cold blood, knowing he has two little girls left behind, just like you have two little girls, just like you commentate on news and politics. Give me some of the range of emotions and thoughts that you're sitting with right now.
Yeah, just sad. The last video I watched, someone had taken of sort of like just the front view. So you can see Kirk, like looking almost toward a camera as though we're pointing at him. And then you hear just like a poof, like what seems like a silencer, I guess. And he's hit, and then he just slumps over. After seeing that video, similar to what Alyse just mentioned, I didn't know. I mean, if we're talking about someone who could be saved, originally I heard this just texting you earlier. I just saw a news blip about that he had been shot. That's all I knew. Then I turned to CNN, heard some of the firsthand accounts. One witness had mentioned that she had seen him shot. She talked about the amount of blood that she saw. What I noticed very early on was that there was no conversation from the doctors. There was nothing released from the hospital. And usually the first thing that we find out is this person going to survive? And that's immediately disseminated out there. So supporters, family, friends, everyone could eventually hear some part of it. And the more you and I were texting, Mike, I'm not getting anything about it. And now it's like that. And my wife, obviously, who's a physician, like we were having the same conversation. I brought it up and she said, that's my thought too, that we have not heard anything about the possibility of survival. And the longer you go without hearing it, you do assume the worst. Yeah, it's a mix of emotions because even before we recorded tonight, I watched some of the clips of some of the things he said. There's a clip in particular where he talks about, humanely removing immigrants as though they were trash. Somehow downplaying the role of ICE and unmarked vehicles, masked, what seems like Gestapo-like soldiers in the streets of major cities now in the U.S. And to look at that humanely, I'll be honest, there was a thought that I had about, well, if you consider that humane, then what happened to you just now, would you consider that the same way? Because we're talking about horrific acts of violence. And obviously the answer is no. This was an individual who used hyperbolic language to get a point across. An accomplished person for sure, but a person who used their platform and that energy on social media and all these different channels to perpetuate a really hateful view of the United States. This is a person who spoke out vehemently against efforts in diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is a person who is anti-immigration. This is a person who spoke out against gay marriage. Now, I don't think being against any of those warrants what happened to him. But I think the best analogy I can draw is someone had a little earlier today when I was listening to some of the programs had likened him to a younger Rush Limbaugh. And I think that's fair. Shortly after Limbaugh's passing, we don't really remember much of what he said. And conservatives may point to the legacy that this individual has of what they would consider patriotic speech. I would consider hate speech, because this was a person who was vehemently also against lesbians and all other sorts of minority groups. But eventually the voice is silenced. And the legacy you wonder about is, well, what did you leave behind? So Kirk is a person who is vehemently anti-colleges, even though he spoke at colleges regularly, including, at the site of his murder. This is a person who had not too long ago talked about women going to college to earn their MRS degree. In other words, they're just there to meet a guy and get married. Hateful things, especially as a father of two little girls who aspire for them to hopefully go into institutions of higher education one day. So there's nothing I agree with, but you see the video, and in that moment, I put aside the things that he has said that I don't agree with. And I just see an individual who's been removed, whose life's been taken from him solely because of the things that he said. And let's be clear, that's what he did. He talked a lot, annoyingly a lot, offensively a lot. But this is not a person who committed a crime. This is not a person who has had any type of criminal record. This is not a person who had touched little children. This is not a person who had engaged in dogfighting, like all kinds of ridiculous things. No, this is just a person with conservative views who spoke a lot to try to get an ideology out, and to his credit, would welcome debates. So his passing leaves a large hole in, for his supporters. And sadly, there are two little children that, starting now, are going to spend the rest of their life without a father who was only 31 years old.
31 years old. And this was the America Comeback Tour where this attack happened over at Utah Valley University. And again, this was part of debates that he was having with taking questions from the audience in the Prove Me Wrong segment of this. As Nick said, very adversarial. I want to play a little bit of what the Utah police and the governor over there, Governor Richardson, said about the shooting. But first, I want to give a little bit of my take on this. And I mentioned this in the YouTube short that we posted, but I'll echo it here again. There are two things that can be true at the same time, right? There's this belief in the First Amendment and the freedom of speech and the freedom of Charlie Kirk to go out there and start Turning Point USA and get more conservatives motivated and push out content that drives people to the ballot box to eventually shape the way he feels like the country should go directionally, right? At some level, you have to applaud that, right? No matter if you're a Democrat, Independent, Republican, you have to applaud that. Thousands of people turning out for him to speak at a college university. That's America at its finest, right? That's kind of the American dream. Juxtapose that with seeing some of the hateful things he has said. The video that Nick sent me that I highly encourage people to go look on Turning Point USA's YouTube channel, where a woman asked him about, hey, my dad was here illegally, but I was born here. He's been a contributing member of society. And Charlie's like, your dad broke the law. Would you break the law to steal milk or steal something like that? And she's like, well, he didn't steal anything. He just came here to give me a better life. And his exchange with that girl showed why those type of viewpoints could eventually lead to something like this, where somebody is so mad at you saying those type of things for people that want to come here to this country to get a better life to their kids, like my grandmother when she brought my dad here from another country because of a war that was happening in that country. And you say that to somebody on a huge platform, millions of subscribers on that channel. And now you end up really almost like the Dark Knight meme, where you see yourself as the hero long enough to become the villain. Now, here's the other thing that I will say. This is the political commentator in me. I worked at Fox News. I worked for Michael Savage in conservative media as my first job out of college. This is now Mike Leon, that goes on CNN and is visible and gets hateful messages and loves arguing with people in the comments. A part of me got a little chilled, but then a part of me realized, and I stepped back and I said, but I don't do what Charlie Kirk does. Nick and I started this show 5 years ago because we're both journalism grads from the same school of Rutgers University. I went to work in television news to format shows, segments, build audiences. When Nick and I started the show, it was to add to the discourse. As Nick said, at worst, we leave something for our kids to listen to. At best is what's happening right now, where we've all been on television and our content is seen by hundreds of thousands of people, which we've accomplished that goal. I don't do political activism. I'm not starting a foundation to mobilize voters. I'm not doing any of that. And this is not hot take hour over here. And hot take hour to feed the content machine that gets you to continue the cycle of recidivism so you can keep watching content like that, so you can get more and more mad so he can make more and more money. It's not how Nick and I operate. We talk to subject matter experts like former federal prosecutor Alyse Adamson about the investigation part of this. We talk to members of Congress, journalists, correspondents. We want to cover the news. This is the news of the day. So the political commentator in me didn't really bat an eye because nobody's trying to do that to me because I don't do the same thing Charlie Kirk does. And my hope is that the Ben Shapiro's of the world, the Candace Owens of the world, the Tommy Larins of the world, the Matt Walshes of the world, the Stephen Crowders of the world, the Tim Pools of the world, those of you, Jenna Ellis, the list goes on and on and on. It's whack-a-mole. But those of you that are in this space of feeding the machine and SEOing it and making stupid thumbnails so people will click on those videos because that's your sole source of revenue, all of you, go back and say, am I doing the right thing today? Am I adding to the discourse here in America? This kid was killed in cold blood and he has 2 little kids. And the 3 of us hate every single thing that this person stood for, but we don't want to see somebody succumb to that. So I ask you, all of you that have pushed out this type of rhetoric and content for years, knowing full well what you're doing, because I worked with some of you. Some of you need to look in the mirror today, all of you, if you want it to be all of you, look in the mirror today and say, what am I doing to add to the discourse today? And if that video is not adding to the discourse, don't upload that video. The change starts with you. Now listen to the governor and the officials in Utah talking about what happened today at Utah Valley.
The only information we have on the suspect, the possible shooter, is taken from closed circuit TV here on campus. We do have that. We're analyzing it, but it is security camera footage, so you can kind of guess what the quality of that is. But we do know dressed in all dark clothing, but we don't have a much better description other than that.
Happy to take a few questions.
The FBI director is posting that a suspect is in custody. I would just like clarification. Do you or do you not have a suspected shooter in custody?
We have a person of interest in custody that is being interviewed right now.
That is not George Zinn.
That is not George Zinn. Okay. That is correct.
All right, Alyse, I want to ask the former federal prosecutor question here. And again, I know you kind of get brought, maybe you can explain to us, you get brought late into the process as investigators are doing their investigation. Once they actually have somebody arrested is when you kind of get brought into all of this. But you've heard some of this here. Give us a little bit of like, what's the situation now? Like, because now there's a manhunt. There was a person of interest in all of this. They just said it there. That person was released. There was a lot of social media videos going around about this older gentleman with glasses that was in custody. And then people there on the ground were like, it wasn't that guy. That guy, this was a shot from like 200 yards away. Now the manhunt begins to look for somebody. What would be some of the things, if you were, a state prosecutor in Utah right now, what would be some of the things that you're trying to look for, listen to?
Mike, that's a good question. Now, first, I've got to get on my soapbox for a moment because I'm a former federal prosecutor, because I had to speak on behalf of victims sometimes when they were decedents, they couldn't speak for themselves. I want to be very careful that we're not victim blaming here. I heard what you said, and I'm going to push back a little bit because even in the United States, hate speech is constitutionally protected. I have heard a lot of distasteful things from Charlie Kirk, but I have never heard anything inciting violence or inviting a demise like this. I vehemently disagree with you there. I think what he says is a different viewpoint. I think it lacks compassion. I believe there's even a quote of his saying empathy is something, a new phenomenon. It's not something he recognizes, but I haven't heard anything from him condoning or inciting violence. And once again, I don't believe anything he said, which is constitutionally free speech, invited what happened here today. Nothing that we say, absent, come on, let's have a duel, should ever invite this form of violence. He's a victim, plain and simple. And I think we need to separate what happened to him from his viewpoints, which again are his own. And we're allowed to have divergent viewpoints in this country. That is what is supposed to make America exceptional, right? Now, to respond to your specific question, it's not always that prosecutors come in late in the game after an arrest. Prosecutors assist with the investigation. I mean, grand jury investigations are what allow investigators to have search warrants and subpoenas. These are very important investigative tools. Let's say you have a suspect, you've developed evidence about someone. It seems like they have several people that they're looking at right now. They want to find the murder weapon, for instance. They haven't even recovered the gun. They're going to need a search warrant to go into somebody's house or in the area that may be private, that they think this gun is being held or there's evidence of the crime. So a prosecutor is ultimately going to have to review that, sign it before it goes to a judge. So there is a huge role for the prosecution team in the, what I like to call the embryonic stages of an investigation. So what I would expect to see is prosecutors, probably federal prosecutors. We see Kash Patel, the FBI director, tweeting. So that means the Department of Justice is involved. We've heard Pam Bondi. So I bet it's federal prosecutors as well, assisting local law enforcement, developing that evidence, helping to secure subpoenas. I mean, we've heard some folks on TV talking about cell phones. I mean, I don't want to get into the ticky-tacky details, but there's ways to geofence an area and isolate all the phone numbers that were present. There's a lot of investigative tools that we don't talk about because it's a little too complicated to put on Law and Order, but they're available. And I guarantee you that the full force of the FBI is using those tools to develop a suspect, and prosecutors are assisting them. What prosecutors can also do early on in investigations is make sure that all that evidence is developed properly, so it will ultimately be admissible in trial. We hear a lot of times, sometimes we rush investigations and that evidence is thrown out. Maybe a confession is taken before someone is Mirandized. And so if you work with your prosecutor, you make sure that all those procedural steps are taken to build an airtight case. And I would bet a case of this magnitude, all of those process steps are going to be properly taken. And there's going to be a lot of attorney involvement here.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. I want to go back to something you said there, because here comes where each of you has a vertical of expertise, right? Nick sleeps next to a pediatric ICU doctor, so he's got the medical perspective. You've got the legal perspective, right, Alyse? None of you.
I also work in higher ed, man.
No, I understand that. So you got education.
That's Nick, great. It's like Nick's got a smart wife.
Right. That's exactly. That was the point. Nick does have a smart wife.
It's true.
It is true. So, but neither of you have worked in television news. Neither of you have been around these people. Neither of you have heard conversations off air. At least you're hearing it a little bit now in CNN green rooms when there's a Republican there. But here's the difference. First off, not condoning anything that happened to Charlie Kirk. Obviously not. But I will push back on some of the things you've said, because he did tweet about a Muslim potentially being mayor of New York City after 9/11. So that's Islamophobia right there. He did tweet that we're going to be packing buses to send to the Capitol in DC in 2021, that we're going to help President Trump fight to take back the country. So whether or not that led to violence, we'll never know, because that case was never brought by Jack Smith. And whether or not these tweets would have been made public and brought into testimony and evidence, we'll never know. But what I will say is that my whole point about that ethos and that system is what Nick and I have talked about. In the first episode or second episode of this show, Naveed Jamali came on the program. Nick will remember this. Naveed is the editor-at-large of Newsweek. Naveed is a former U.S. Navy intelligence officer, and he wrote a popular book about how he caught this Russian spy here in America. Naveed used to go on Fox News a lot. Naveed used to go on a bunch of the shows that, let's be honest, at the networks that we've gone on. And one of the shows that he went on in particular was Hannity and Combs, a show that yours truly, who's talking right now, was a PA on once upon a time. So Naveed sees Combs, Alan Combs, who's no longer with us. He died in 2007, the Democrat on the show, and another Republican in the Rush Limbaugh mold, hugging, asking about each other's kids, blah, 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 in the green room. And Naveed said, "Oh, I thought you guys hated each other." And he's like, "No, hate each other. What? I'm the godfather to his kid." And he's like, "So this is professional wrestling." Professional wrestling meaning that when we go out there and the cameras turn on, there's going to be some semblance of, I don't believe some of the stuff that I'm telling you right now, but this is how I make money. And I'm telling you that as somebody who has worked for some of these people, and they're in my phone, and I know people that still work for those people, putting on the black t-shirt and going to tell you that Barbie is woke, I have to do it. I have to upload that video. So telling you that migrants are coming here and taking over the country, similar to what Charlie Kirk sent out tweet-wise about Nigerians that have come to America, similar to all of these things that he has done, is the reason why I say some of them believe their ish, but not all the way. Not all the way. And I think that if Charlie knew that he would meet his demise in Utah, if you asked him 10 minutes before, I give you an opportunity right now to go out there and play it straight and not actually do what you're doing, which is he got asked a question about does he know the stats around mass shootings? And the first thing he did, Alyse, was do a whataboutism about gang violence. He did a whataboutism crime stat on gang violence to a question that was not about that. Somebody asked him about mass shootings. And then is when he got shot. And 10 to 30 seconds before that, he was talking about the amount of transgender folks that have the ability to get weapons. So again, this is part of what I'm talking about now. He has created we speak about him in the past tense. And again, I truly feel for his family, his kids. I've never met him before. I do know people that work at Turning Point USA, as you know, Alyse, and I've introduced you to one of them. But like I feel for him and his family, right? And the kids that will grow up without a dad. But when I take a step back and I look at that ethos of people, right? Knowing some of them like I do, knowing people that work for them like I do, including one that you listen to all the time, I'm here to tell you that sometimes they don't believe it. Sometimes they wake up and they're like, yeah, I guess. Tell me about Barbie. I didn't see it, but it's woke, right? So I got to throw it out there. And that's the thing, Alyse, when you don't believe it, and you do things like this, right? This could happen. I'm not condoning that it happened, but there's a litany of examples, even in the answer you gave me, of things that he has said about your rights, about the rights of people that look like Nick, things that are racial in nature. I'm not condoning his death. I'm telling you, maybe he didn't believe it all the way. And if he had an opportunity to do it all over again, my hope is that the people that create the same type of content like him listen up and go, am I adding to the discourse when I push this video out, or am I inflaming everything? Because Jesse Waters just today, Alyse, I'm going to let you respond. Jesse Waters today on The Five, as people are listening to this, it's the next day, blamed Democrats and said they
are at war with us. Whether we want to accept it or not, they are at war with us. And what are we going to do about it? How much political violence are we going to tolerate? This is a turning point, and we know which direction we're going.
And Greg Gutfeld, with no evidence, is like, this has to be the Democrats, if you just think about it. So I ask you, does he mean it? Or is he helping here with respect to the rhetoric?
So there was a lot there, Mike, to unpack. I mean, first of all, I know, and I've texted you this, that there is a lot of kayfabe in the news media world, and that is the pageantry of professional wrestling, right? I learned that in the green room. There are people I won't mention right now who are some of the biggest MAGA supporters on air, but are some of the sweetest, most reasonable people in the green room. So yes, it's for show, and rage baiting has become the new norm in social media. It gets likes, it gets clicks, it gets this social currency, right? I understand that. What it's doing is it's contributing to the divisiveness in America. Now, attributing all that to the right, I think, is also unfair, because if you go on X right now and you read some of the comments about Charlie Kirk's death from folks who are vehemently opposed to the right, they are disgusting. I've read horrific stuff from people with extreme viewpoints to the left. I'm also thinking about what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania last year when President Trump was almost assassinated. Some of the things I read coming from the extreme left were horrifying to me. It's not helping. It's not helping. And so we can sit here and we can point to conservative media pundits as the problem, and they are a problem when we are pushing divisiveness.
Not the whole problem. They're not the whole. I'm not blaming them holistically.
To me, I see this as an American problem. I'm seeing this as a broader issue. We as Americans have gotten to a place where our viewpoints are so extreme that we are looking at our political opponents as our enemies, as sworn enemies. And my only point is it does not naturally follow if I sit here and say things like I saw a clip of Charlie Kirk questioning the murder of George Floyd. As a Black person, that disgusts me. Charlie Kirk said he doesn't believe in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. As a Black person, that disgusts me. Do you know what it doesn't make me think? Oh, that we should take up arms and murder somebody as a result. That is not a normal thought pattern after you hear something that you disagree with. What we should be thinking is, how do we win Americans' hearts and minds to counteract what I'm hearing? How do we win at the polls? So that's why I disagree with you, because if we start to believe that words that are not explicitly calling for violence are in fact inciting violence, then I think that is a larger cultural problem in this country. I should be allowed to say things that even offend you, Mike, and that don't say, I'm so offended, I want to kill her. That is a problem with our culture. And I think we need to take a very hard look in the mirror as a society. We're at a crossroads. I mean, we have political violence on both sides. We had the shooting in Minnesota, Governor Shapiro assassination attempt earlier. Like, this is an American problem. And we can either go the right way, which is everybody tamps down the rhetoric. Right. And we recognize that, honestly, it's because our nation is so secure. I mean, think about the common enemy. It's been so long since 9/11. We're not really fighting anybody else. We're just fighting each other. It's like an incredibly dysfunctional family. So we can go that route where we get some therapy and we recognize we're all Americans. We're in this together and we have this beautiful nation that we can actually make better, or we can continue down our current path and just bear arms, take up arms against one another and destroy this country. That's the way I look at it.
Hold on, Nick. Hold on, Nick. Yeah. Before you go, I agree with everything you said. We're not disagreeing. You're missing what I'm saying. I'm telling you that some of them don't believe what they're doing. And those on the right are 6 times the amount of people that are on the left doing the same exact thing. And again, I say this as somebody who's worked in conservative media. Neither of you have worked in conservative media.
I agreed there was KFOB. I just want to be clear. I didn't miss what you said. I agreed there was KFOB.
No, but I'm just saying.
That means that it's an act. It's an act.
And that's the problem. What I'm saying is that, again, for folks out there uninitiated, this man, I want to read it here because I do not want to get this wrong. He was at the American Comeback Tour, and this was the segment called Debate Me, Bro. Okay. So I just want people to think of that just for a second, right? Nick and I, when we come on this show, the intentionality behind what we do is not driven by how we make money, because we make a little bit. We all have jobs, right? Their sole source of revenue is doing this. And as I've told you in text, and I'll bring it over here, if machine is not fed, then they can't live. Right. Patrick Bet David is a perfect example of Valuetainment, which is down here in my neck of the woods in Fort Lauderdale. And now he's a venture capitalist and he got into the content game, but he's been able to saturate that and create jobs just off of this viewpoints. Right. We could argue about, well, he's creating jobs and he's helping. Yeah, great. But look at what he's pushing out and look at the intentionality behind what he's pushing out. This is not condoning Charlie Kirk's death, because as I tweeted to somebody in the wake of President Trump's assassination attempt, the first one, the one in Butler, we had Representative Dan Goldman on the show. It's the first question we kicked off with. And we sent that person that clip where Dan Goldman's like, I don't know what my colleagues are going to say right now, but let me tell you something. As somebody who led one of the impeachment hearings against President Trump, who disagrees with every single thing the man stands for, I am calling for gun control, and we shouldn't be trying to kill our rivals. You beat them at the ballot box. So nobody here on this panel is advocating for what happened to Charlie Kirk to happen to others. My point is, for those of them that are out there in the ethos that we listen to them, the people that work there today, when you're titling that video in your DAM, which is a digital asset management tool, or your CMS, which is a content management system. For those of you that are listening to this that do that, because I'm going to push this out and I'm going to SEO the hell out of this to make sure you guys see this. When you push that video out today of talking about something that's woke or migrants or look at these immigrants that are here flooding it, think about the intentionality of what you're doing with that content. And I think if Charlie had to do it all over again, not knowing him or speaking for him, I would hope that he would take the option of like, it is time to maybe tone it down and add to the discourse. Maybe I stop playing this heel to keep with the wrestling terminology. And maybe I try to play it on the up and up. That's my point. Some of them don't mean it. And I'm telling you that as some of them are, one of them just texted me right now. Some of them don't mean it, Alyse. And that is the problem.
I hear you and I believe you. I've seen it, but I actually think Charlie Kirk believed what he was pushing out. I mean, he started Turning Point USA. He was the leader of a movement. So I think he is easily distinguishable from talking heads who just want to get their name out there, who want to argue on a panel so they'll get rebooked. That means put back on the show. And then people who have dedicated their life to a movement. This is my personal belief, given what I know about Charlie Kirk. I think he actually believed these things. I'm not saying his viewpoint is correct, but what I am saying is that he was consistent. He started an organization and he was evangelizing. I don't even know. Is that the right word? I don't know. But you know what I'm saying. He was out there preaching his viewpoints across college campuses. So I don't think he was just doing it for clicks. I think he was truly spearheading a movement that he believed in. So again, I think there's two different conversations happening. I'm not missing your point. I'm saying with respect to Charlie Kirk, I think this is somebody who practiced what they preached. Now, if some of that is hate speech, to us, it's hate speech, but it's his actual viewpoints. There are people who I think are disingenuous, who recognize that they can pull that in, repackage it, push it out to the masses, get clicks, monetize it. And that's a separate conversation. That is the social media space that we are now living within that is unregulated. And that is problematic. And a lot of people profit off of that. But I don't think Charlie Kirk was that. I don't think he was that.
I think it's a little, too big to fail with the banks. Like, yeah, maybe he started out with the movement. Now he's too big where like, I'm pot committed. There's a poker term. I'm pot committed, meaning how much money I've put in versus how much money the other players put in. If I feel like I got a good hand, I can't lose that pot because I don't have enough money left. So I'm pot committed. I have to see this all the way to the end. Nick, give me something of the balance here. You were my soundboard in college. So now we're here in adult life. What we're talking about and the wrestling analogy that we all get, which is perfect, by the way. Thoughts on all of it?
I think you're both on to something. I think that in general, we've reached a point, and this is where whether Kirk believed in what he said or not, I mean, he's contributing to, I mean, we're using so many analogies here, but I'll use the one about like just boiling water, right? Like eventually, like it's eventually going to boil over. And whether people were committed to what they believed in or if it was an act, all of it contributes the same way. I mean, the war is just going to keep rising, right? However your level of contribution to it is. The problem then becomes that the outgrowth of that can sometimes be such a level of passion that you're producing these types of effects in terms of murder. We saw this in Minnesota. I mean, you have a person who dressed like a police officer stalking politicians. We saw this years ago with the attempted murder of Gabby Giffords. Guy rolls right up to her as she's on the corner, just basically talking to constituents, puts a bullet in her head. It's funny because historically, I mean, we've had numerous presidents that have been assassinated or were the victims, or there was an attempt at assassinating them. So there is something endemic in the United States about wanting to engage in political violence. I mean, we can look at the Boston Tea Party. I mean, we've always been, violence is not necessarily that far removed from politics in American history. So, what we saw today is just yet another example of that. But I agree with Alyse about the fact that collectively we all need to take a deep breath. What I appreciate about this conversation that the three of us are having is this ability to look at this from the macro, regardless of anyone's political leanings, but just recognizing that all types of efforts to try to contribute to a hyperbolic conversation is not helpful. Some of the comment, I mean, there was a particular comment that I think on one of the videos you posted, Mike, where someone's like, you're posting the video again of Kirk being murdered, and someone simply wrote "nice shot." Like, that's psychotic. And of course, then there's people who cling to talking about Second Amendment rights and things like that. And the gun thing falls into two different categories for me. Like, because certainly I think the three of us could all own a weapon in our home, and I trust the three of us to be responsible with it. But at the same time, indiscriminately allowing anyone to purchase a weapon, this is what you may run into. We're going to do a deep profile into the shooter. When eventually this person is apprehended, you're going to see the media go ahead and basically do a true crime piece to it. It's like we just did with the shooter in Utah. That doesn't help either, because the next person who does this is going to be inspired by this, much like the Utah shooter had written on their guns the names of previous mass shooters. There's not a reason for me to know the names Adam Lanza, Dylan Klebold, Eric Harris, Dylan Roof. We should know these things. But the media in some form or another, not necessarily lionizes, but you platform these people in a way where they don't even speak, but their actions do. And people then emulate that or see it as an opportunity. What happened today, I don't know what inspired this person. Was it simply that they were so vehemently against what Kirk stood for? I don't know. Or is it just the fact that when we think about current day conservatives, Charlie Kirk is a very pivotal face in that movement? And was that enough? All I do know is that one person's words, again, they have no actions of record to look at. One person's words had them murdered. And if we're living in a country where that is potentially may well be the norm, because we have seen it recently with what happened in Governor Shapiro's mansion in Harrisburg and the shootings in Minnesota. If that's where we're headed, and I think Crossroads, as Alyse put, is a really good way to view this. We have to realize that it's just going to get worse. Yeah. When I saw Jesse Waters make that comment about, they are at war with us, which is hysterical because Jesse Waters is a coward. But when you say things like that, this is to the Fox viewer going to be, yeah, they are. I have to do something about it. That's what contributes to this conversation. That's what contributes to this hatefulness. Not, as some people have said, hey, can we all take a deep breath like Samuel L. Jackson and do the right thing? Right? Can everybody just chill out for a second?
Alyse, I'll give you the final word here before we wrap here, because this was a special episode to talk a little bit about the day in totality. And then obviously, like I mentioned before, our thoughts, I truly mean this, our thoughts and prayers are to Charlie's widow and the two kids as well, that now see their dad, who's 31 years old, gunned down. As you said, images everywhere, videos everywhere. It's horrific. That's a broader conversation about sharing all of these things and how it, has an impact on the family. But I'll give you a chance to give your final thoughts, not only on the day, but what you're going to be watching for as this manhunt continues to unfold. Again, as of this recording, this suspect is not in custody.
Thanks, Mike. Just to respond to Nick, I want to make my position very clear. I agree with Nick. The call for war or using the rhetoric that now conservatives are at war with Democrats, or this is Democrats are at war with conservatives. That's those to me are insightful words, violence inciting words. Those are stoking the flames. That's very different than sharing a viewpoint that is unpalatable for many. That is, to me, that's the type of rhetoric that is extremely problematic, not helpful at all. And again, for Jesse Waters to say that on an evening where we haven't even found the shooter, found their motivations, we're assuming they're left leaning. I mean, again, that is a good guess given who Charlie Kirk was and the deliberate nature of this murder. But the reality is we don't have any information. It is irresponsible, number one, to start opining on something before you have any facts. And number two, using words like war when we're talking about political opposition. So I want to be very clear that that type of rhetoric, that is inviting violence and should completely be condemned and has no place in the media. I think it is incredibly irresponsible. Very different than sharing viewpoints on immigrants, which again is hurtful and I think lacks compassion and understanding of systemic reasons that folks come to the United States and how they contribute to the economy. But that is not an invitation for violence. So I just wanted to distinguish those two points.
Yeah.
What we should be looking out for in the coming days and weeks, again, it's going to be the apprehension of the person who did this, and kind of tying that together with what I was just saying. It's going to be sussing out their motivations. Why did they do this? What was it that radicalized them to the point that they were sitting with a high-powered assault rifle on a roof? Were they radicalized by some left-leaning media, by something they saw on YouTube? Are they mentally ill? That goes into a conversation about gun control. And how do we both help those folks who are in mental health crisis, but also keep firearms away from them, right? I mean, it's going to lead to a lot of different conversations based upon who this individual is. And then, of course, once they're apprehended, as a law nerd, I'll be very curious how they're ultimately charged and how they go through the system. Are they going to plead guilty? How are they caught? Is it obvious that they're the shooter? Is it a lot of circumstantial evidence that ultimately brings them down? I don't know. And I will be following the investigation very closely, and then ultimately following the legal process and maybe even a trial. We'll have to see, but definitely going to be having that on my podcast in the weeks to come.
For sure. And go subscribe to Alyse's show. At least you heard it here. If you're on her YouTube channel, thank you for watching. If you're on our YouTube channel, thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Listen to the audio version of this podcast if you want, wherever you get them, wherever you listen to them. Go to leonmedianetwork.com. You can catch both of our shows, Can We Please Talk, and At Least You Heard It Here, there. As always, I'm Mike Leon. My thank yous to Alyse Adamson, Nick Zaveri. We'll see everybody next time.